Hello beta testers, this is the beta test video for 2015. If you were with us last year, you remember we did a video. It's kind of a one-take video, unless I sneeze or the phone rings or something. And the whole idea is to show you what's new for this year and how you would access it and how you would use it. If you forget from last year, there is a beta test video out there from last year, which I'll probably attach to an email. I expect this video is going to be a lot shorter than last year. It took about 40-something minutes because last year we had that whole new function being introduced of the observation program. And this year we've mostly just enhanced things as opposed to new features. There's new features within a feature, but that's an enhancement. Anyhow, we'll sit on this screen for a little bit. First thing you will be getting, if you haven't already, installation instructions. And in there you should make note that you should not be applying this beta to any production systems. It should be to a test system if you're using this for a business. Most times it's not a problem, but sometimes we change databases, things like that, and it'll mess you up. So make sure you have this as a second or just a beta system that's unique from your other system or separated from your other system, your production system. In any case, that's one thing to keep in mind, and those instructions should have everything you need. Beta testing will run, normally I say for about a month or so, but obviously we utilize you guys through the hurricane season as we make changes. And I'm sure we'll be doing it again this year. So let's get started. And first we're just going to do a summary of some of the changes. And I'm just going to use the website to do that, and as opposed to a PowerPoint type presentation. So here's the What's New page. And this may change a bit before the final version, but it pretty much explains the changes we're going to talk about. And even though this is designed sort of towards marketing, we'll be able to go through these features on this video so that you know how to recognize them and use them. Because some of these things have very specific type preferences or options that you need to change, and those will become obvious as we go through this. Like I said, this is a one-cut type video, so if I seem to be slowing down in a few places, it's because first time going through this, probably get better as we go along. Anyhow, expertise, that's the first one here. You all should know what that is. It's the video discussions, and it looks like we'll be expanding those to winter and spring months. And other than that, the main reason we have it up here is because it is a feature, unless you have storm info, that is only provided to folks who maintain current software. So I consider it a perpetual enhancement, and hopefully it works out that way. So we won't go into that. The first feature that we're going to get into is really this forecast trend. And let me click on this so we can see a little bit more about it. I think this was a suggestion from a user that we thought had a lot of merit. A lot of folks like to know when they are running reports for their locations how this is changed from the last advisory. As a Katrina changes its forecast path, or an Andrew, or any storm, how is that impacting us? So, for example, this is a report from Wilma, and what it shows is the impact we do not have advanced wind estimation on in this case to all these locations, the forecast impact, and the trend from the prior advisory. So just eyeballing it, you can see that Naples, the trend was down 18 miles per hour. Fort Pierce over here was 20 miles per hour down. Some of the pluses were Marathon, not a whole lot of pluses. Locations that were further away, Martha's Vineyard, Newport. Obviously the path had gotten closer to New England, and that's why those went up. So it'll reflect both intensity changes in the forecast as well as track changes. And we think this is going to be real useful to the users because some folks are running reports and then running the old report to see how it compared, and this is going to give them that information all on one report. And that does show up in the narrative impact statement, also in the summary reports, and in the risk impact reports in all those locations, and also the risk impact tab that we have on the system. So I've glossed over that pretty quick, and we'll show an example of running it, but this to me is the biggest change from last year, or the most important change. The next one is enhanced, and let me go back here, enhanced wind estimation. I say varying elevations because other than some minor tweaks that we've done to the wind routines, the calculations for estimating wind, we've also included something that will allow the system to determine winds at different elevations. So of course on the web page we show some tall buildings, and I didn't realize that the hotel in Miami, Four Seasons, is almost 800 feet high. Interesting architecture, and I'm sure they had an interesting design for that to make it withstand hurricane Category 5, probably hurricane force winds. But anyway, enough on that. So what we've done is add the ability for you to identify a wind estimation elevation for your location. So the example I showed down here, and I just picked Boca Raton in case they had condos there. I could have picked Galt Ocean Mile in Fort Lauderdale. In any case, so I picked different elevations at the same physical location, as just from 33 feet, which is the standard, up to 500 feet, and ran the reports, and you could see how the winds vary with elevation. And you get some obviously stronger winds aloft, and that's what's just trying to show. So anybody who has assets elevations other than 33 feet, you can actually even make this lower, although I wouldn't advise that because the winds will decrease as you get nearer the surface. But there's so many other factors, friction, that are playing a role in that I wouldn't suggest that. But in any case, so that's the other enhancement, and we'll demonstrate this also. And how you set it up, that's the little tricky part. Next one is the current weather observations and depiction, the enhancement to that. And we basically have added some more data to that report, or to that function, I should say. Precipitation, although I'm having a hard time getting this data all of a sudden, which I'm working on. Precipitation data from the CocoRa's network. Heat index is also displayed, which was a simple, or I should say a calculation that we can get from dew point and temperature, and also relative humidity, because that was a byproduct of all that. The rest of the system is pretty much the same. I won't show you these reports, we'll show you that later. But here's an example working around Mobile after some heavy rains and where the locations are in the rains. But I will show you the report because this is something that right now we're working on making sure we can get back. But there's, for example, a report from the precipitation on a certain day, and a lot of it around Texas and that day, and the locations and how much they got. The rest of the system is pretty much as is, although I think we've made a few tweaks here and there, but nothing major, just some minor stuff, so that's not even mentioned. So we'll want you to obviously go through all this and make sure everything is still working. That's part of the testing, is not just testing the new functions, but making sure the old ones haven't gotten destroyed or broken by the new functions. Usability improvements, there's a couple small things, but one thing that we've always had, not always, we've had an issue with occasionally, is people that didn't realize a depression had been renamed to a storm, and on your system that's a different storm to open. And so they open up the depression thinking it's now Andrew, or whatever name the A is, and they see there's no data coming in, where actuality data is coming in, but it's coming in as a named storm. And so we've made changes there to sort of keep that from happening. So that should be helpful to folks. Crosswind calculations, we've added that about a year or two ago, but we had some airport users that needed to know the crosswind component, the 25 knot crosswind component, and when that occurred. So the example we show here is in New Orleans, a couple airports, their runways, crosswind component, and so this would be, for example, the report showing the winds expected at those locations. The details would show the crosswind component, and this is the speed and the gust. And then the extra thing we added down here was the ability to export an Excel spreadsheet that shows the onset and the ending of 25 knot winds. And this one is very particular specific. I don't think many users will use this, but if you happen to be involved with any airport operations, then this would be of certain interest to you. And we do have some of those customers and some Air Force folks. We enhanced the wind probabilities mostly to just include the Western Pacific now. Before it was just the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific, but now for the global users, you have the wind probabilities for the Western Pacific. Won't go into many more details here, but we also we enhanced some of the Excel exports to include obviously the forecast wind trend data that's new and some of the additional observation data. I won't go to a separate tab for that. Risk impact reports now have some of that same information included. Narrative impact statement has the forecast wind trend. So these are byproducts of the enhancement mentioned above. Storm surge improvements. We have not updated any of the storm surges for this year yet. And as of right now, we're still trying to figure out which ones have changed. There's a kind of a delay in the storm surge program updates, which I'm working through. This is from NOAA. Enhanced network operations are a very specific one too, and without getting too confusing, if you have a network version, it allows you to allow the server to do all of the updating and all of the email alerting, while the workstations, you don't need to keep a workstation running to keep the email alerts going or to do the database updates. And so this forces the server to do all the work and does not allow the workstation to do any. It's simply just an indicator. I don't think you're going to need to worry about testing that. It's a very specific need for just a few customers. System appearance, that's just the different skins. So as you can see, I don't want to say the volume of changes, but the changes we've made are enhancing existing functions, which is going to allow us to go through this much quicker as opposed to last year when we spent at least a half hour on the new observation function. And hopefully you're familiar with that function. Even though we didn't have much opportunity last year to use it during a storm, it's really a year-round kind of thing. Okay, so let's start with the most important function, I think. Well, I shouldn't say that, but we'll come back to the expertise in a second just to familiarize yourself with that. But the forecast wind trend is the one I want to talk about right now. Okay, we've loaded up Rita when it was in the Gulf of Mexico, the advisory 20, and let me get the track out here. Here we go. Now what I want to show you was that the current track for advisory 20 takes it through this part of Texas. Let's get a state boundary in there so you can see it better. The prior one, 19, took it closer to Galveston, and 18 was south of it. So 19 was closer to Galveston, actually headed, I think, in the eye wall. So it's moving it away a little bit to the northeast. Now you could certainly look at that and say, gee, I guess the winds are lower. But this is the beauty of the wind trend, is you can come up here now, and if you run a report, and I'll just use small map. I'm using pretty big fonts here. I got rid of the graph because we don't need that. Look how things have changed. Galveston Island, highest winds 79 miles per hour, and I haven't turned on advanced wind yet, but that's either way it's going to work the same way. The wind trend is down 53 miles per hour because one was an eye wall hit and the other wasn't. Lake Charles, it goes up. Lafayette goes up. Everything towards Louisiana goes up, as you'd expect. Port O'Connor, minus 14. New Orleans goes up, again, because of the path slightly to the right now. So that's just the quick and dirty of it. That's how it gives you that information. And if, like I said, if you wanted to export this to Excel or print it out, it will show up on all those reports. Let me do a quick report. So this is just a preview of a report, and there's the new field, wind trend, miles per hour, comes after those two. Normally the other data, forecast rain and watch and warning, would be filled in, but since we're using a storm from several years ago, we didn't have that rainfall data, and the watch and warning feature, as far as the zones, came in later. But enough of that. So that's the critical field there. Also, this field, this tab, I should say, over here, the risk impact, would show that also. But right now we have it set to Miami. Let's change that over to Galveston, I guess. By the way, the background we're using here, the skin, is the iTunes. Let me get this right down first. I can't do two things at once. The iTunes skin, and that's why it looks so gray, and it looks kind of different than what you're used to. I'm going to save those changes. And now let's go to that tab here, Galveston, and all that information now shows up. The trend information is now part of this data. It's part of the risk bars. So the forecast wind tendency is down, so that's green. It also shows up here as in the narrative impact statement. Oh, and there's the phone. Coming back to the report, everything that you export, whether it's printer, HTML, PDF, text file, Excel, spreadsheet, shape file, report data, the Google Earth, executive report, and this is that other new one, that trend data should show up. So for example, we did Google Earth earlier, like 2 minutes ago, and there's Galveston Island, and of course that has a picture there, and it shows forecast wind trend minus 53. So we try to obviously spread that information around to all of the exported type items. Now keep in mind, when you use advanced wind estimation, which I'll turn on right now, the numbers will change. There'll be less of a change in numbers because advanced wind is going to lower the wind speeds across the board. So let's just run it for the same set of locations, and you can see, although the trend is still significant, Galveston went from 90 down to 54, minus 36. They're a little bit less. So it'll work obviously with advanced wind and without advanced wind. Quick note on county and zip codes. By default, we have the forecast wind trend turned off for those because of the amount of time, especially with zip codes, for it to calculate. It's actually doing two calculations when it does the reports. So if you have 100 locations, it's not a big deal, but if you have 3,200 counties or 32,000 zip codes, then it can take a while to run. So I'll show you that user option right now. Let me change the appearance on this while we're here. Just we'll get it back to the boring default system. So that gray may drive you a little crazy. All right, so let's go to user preferences. Here we go. And under the report impact analysis down here, and this changed slightly. I got rid of some of the icon, the pictures. There's a couple new fields. They're not obvious, but these down here have to do with forecast wind trends. It's kind of a negative. Do not show wind trends for locations. Uncheck recommended in case you get confused by that. Do not show for counties. So I've checked it for counties and zip codes. And then I talk about why. So if you want to get wind trends for counties, a county report or zip code reports, you're going to want to uncheck that. You can certainly do that in testing. The counties actually isn't too bad, but the zip codes takes quite a bit longer. Okay, So I'll uncheck that. Let's save those changes, and we'll see. I won't keep you on hold here, but we'll run a county report. And so it's analyzing counties, and then it's doing again. Like I said, it really isn't that bad for counties. Zip codes is a little bit more. So here you can see and the trends by county. And it is sorted by maximum wind speed. I believe you can also sort it by trend. Yeah, which is useful. So you can see right away the locations that are getting increased impact. And if you go to the bottom, the ones, I haven't gotten there yet, the ones that have the largest decrease, Galveston County being the leader of the bunch. So I think we beat that one pretty silly. Just briefly, the expertise on your system. It shows up at expert analysis. There's nothing to see right now, but during the hurricane season there will be. And I won't go through all the details on that, but like I said, we consider that a sort of a perpetual enhancement. You get to hear yours truly talk about what's going on, and now not just in the summer, but if you're so inclined, also in the winter and spring. If you live in South Florida and you're only interested in things affecting you, then winter and spring can be kind of boring. But if you're a user that has year-round interest in weather or just want to hear my voice, then you'd want to listen during the winter and spring. Okay, let's get to this varying elevation one. And like I said, at first glance, you think, gee, this is something I wouldn't be interested in. But you'd be surprised if you think about your business and whether you're interested in power lines at a certain elevation or something, any assets that are different elevation, you might have a use for this. Okay, the first thing you have to do is set up your locations, and hopefully I've done that here. Let's take a look at that. So we're going to come over and select our system preferences. If you remember, that brings up this type of screen. And we're going to go to location maintenance. Now I've already added these locations, but I can add another if you'd like to show you how to do that. The ones I added were Boca Raton, and I have them at the different elevations and the lat lon, at least the location I picked. It's not the same as the city of Boca Raton. I was at these Latin lons, and notice this has wind estimation levels. So for example, if I wanted to add another one, let's say at 300 feet, just to complete 100 through 500, I could hit add location, and I should be able to do a copy, but unfortunately not. I'm going to add Boca Raton, 300 feet, Florida, and I had written this down. The lat was 26.343, longitude minus 80.07076, plot size 0, location elevation feet, that's for slosh. For wind estimates, we're going to make it 300 feet. Okay, update table, and let's take a look, see if we have that in there. Okay, there's our locations. That all looks pretty good. Now let's add that to our location group, and I believe I put it into one special one called Boca High Rise, and I just have to add the one for 300 feet. Okay, I'm going to select that, and that's good. So that's the key thing. You need to add your locations. It's not going to estimate the wind elevation, winds for your surface elevation. It's above ground level. That's key, and you have to set it up. All right, let's exit that. And oh, I forgot to do one thing. I don't want to do that. Let me go back and make sure that the roughness index was actually calculated correctly for that. This is for the advanced wind estimation. 300 feet. Sorry, this takes a second. 1687. Let's compare that. I'm just doing a quick check. Yeah. All right. So those all look good now, and I'm not going to have it check for weather observations. Coming back to this, so now we have Rita, but that's not going to work for our location in Boca. So let's change that to a Wilma. And we'll just I don't know, we'll use Wilma 5, which was an advisory 34. At the time, it was still only 100 miles per hour, and the forecasts, I don't think it was supposed to be a major storm at that time. Let's see. 110, yeah, close. In any case, so let's go ahead and run our report. I mean, if we run the report for our Boca high-rise, here we have it. The trend doesn't change, but that's not what we're looking for. And what we do see, and this is using advanced wind, and that's the other key thing, this only works with advanced wind. So EM Pro users, even though you're not one of them, shouldn't have to worry about this. And this is the forecast winds from ground level 33 feet, which is a standard level, sustained and gust. And as you'd expect, they go up with height, and they kind of level off when you get to a certain point. So 300 feet now has 86 miles per hour compared to 400. You can see it all here. So rewriting it for a later advisory, it's pretty important. 73 miles per hour at ground level. At 500 feet, you've got a major sustained winds at major hurricane force. And this is using advanced wind. So it's pretty critical if you have assets sitting up to 300 feet to see what those differences are. So that's really all there is to that. Like I said, it's kind of a specialized thing, but it could be useful to at least a subset of users or customers. Okay, so enough on that. Current weather observations and depiction. This one's actually pretty simple since we've just added a couple things. Let me start that program, the current weather observation program. So here's the weather observation program. You notice a few changes. We have RH for relative humidity, heat for heat index, precipitation for precipitation. Precipitation function right now, the function's working, but the data feed was discontinued, I think, by the Weather Service, so I'm working directly with the CocoRa's folks to try to get data from them. So I can't push this and show you what it looks like, but it's very similar exactly to what it looks like when I clicked here, and here's the rainfall reports around Mobile, and you can show them for all over the country. So that's precipitation. So we're going to have to skip that and come back to heat index. Now it's March 19th. Heat indexes are not that impressive, but they do have some that are above 80 in Florida. So that's what you're seeing there. Relative humidity, that's what you'd expect it would look like. Different humidities, which is really more useful, I think, when you look at a large scale. And what I've done is get rid of the labels. And the green, as you expect, is moist. Blue is less moist. Drier is the yellow, and orange being the driest. Relative humidities here sitting around 20-something%. So it goes from 20% up to near 100% in the green. Certainly you can put labels back on if you want to make it a little cluttered and then look at the data. So that's the humidity. So if we go searching for heat indexes, we can find some in South America right now. So if I do a station report and sort by heat index, again, that's a new function, you can see some locations. I don't know what they are, but they're in South America. And when the heat index goes over 105, it highlights it. When it goes over 115, it highlights it even more. So if you have people out in the field or just a general interest in where it's getting to be dangerous heat indexes, then this will be a nice little graph to have, or a report to have. Notice the humidity is also on that same report. Keep in mind you can also run reports on your locations, so your location groups. In this case we picked the world, and it finds the closest station and gives you the report for that. So for example, with the US, we'll pick, I don't know, South Florida. We'll sort by heat index, and you'll see your South Florida locations and all the data, including the heat index. That's all I can really think of with the observation program. So let's move down the list. Usability improvements. I'm afraid this is something that you won't be able to actually experience until it happens. I don't know how you test this, but I'll have to do all the testing on this. But basically, if you've got a depression and they've named it into a storm, and a new advisory came out, and you go to open the depression, and even if the system just opens up, it'll say this has likely been renamed to Tropical Storm Arthur. Would you like to open that storm and delete the other one? And you can just say yes. That's about the extent of that, other than other little things you probably won't even notice. Crosswind calculations. Again, this is a real detailed one. I wonder if we can do enhanced wind probabilities first before we lose our Pacific storm. Let's try that. Okay, so this is very similar to the Atlantic. Really, it's identical, but I want to show you. This is a tropical storm that's forecast to weaken. Actually, I've moved it back a few days. And what you're able to do, you couldn't do before, this function would not be available with just display wind probabilities, is go ahead and say display the wind probabilities for that. This only works in the, well, obviously in the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific, and now the Western Pacific, but not the Southwest Pacific or the Northern and Southern Indian. Maybe that'll come next. In any case, so that's the wind probability enhancement. Pretty simple. When we get some Pacific storms during beta testing, you can try that. So let's take a look at this crosswind thing. And let me change the database. And I think I had Katrina loaded in that example. A earlier position for Katrina. Unless you have airport type interest, this might bore you. But first thing you have to do is set up your location. I've already done that, but location maintenance. And I used KNEW for New Orleans and also MSY. So what I did is set up these two locations. And you notice one says 090, and that's supposed to be for runway 090. And the other is 360. What you define is the crosswind direction. So 090, which runs east and west, has a crosswind direction of about 180. In this case, it was a little bit off, 177.087, which is close enough. They don't get into that much detail when they name runways. In any case, so we've got those two runways there. And you add the location just like we did before. I won't go through that now. And here's New Orleans, MSY, with similar type things, and the crosswind directions being 90 degrees off from that. And then I created a location group, I believe, or else I put them in the small map. Maybe I put them in the small map. No, I didn't. Right here is airport runways, and I added all those to the list. So that's the setup. It's really not that hard. The other thing you have to do, which is something that I think some folks might forget, is go to your user preferences and make sure that you have selected the estimated 25 knot wind field. You don't have to do that just for crosswinds, but for the 25 knot onset and exit you do. This by default is off. So when you click it on, it gives you all the warnings, so you can turn it on. So that's the two things. You set up in your system preferences the locations, and then here you make sure that's selected. You probably want to do that anyway for the rest of the system. I'm going to save those changes. Let me minimize that. Open Katrina again. It usually closes a storm when you do system updates. Then you simply come up to Location Impact Reports, select Airport Runways, and we'll get rid of this chart. And it shows the impact report to all those locations, and as you'd expect, at each location, aside from runway, the winds are the same because this is only doing crosswind. But let's look at New Orleans crosswind, and you can see the crosswind component like this. So you've got the crosswind component, and the negative, it really should be absolute value, and I'm not sure most people that use it understand that. But when you have a strong northerly wind, which we don't, this is the runway that runs east and west, the crosswind is higher. When it's an easter or westerly wind, it's much lower. It's running down down the runway. We would see the opposite of that when I clicked on the other runway, the one that runs north-south with a west wind. You're getting the full crosswind component here. You can see the 110, 130 down here. Same thing with MSY. We just wanted to use a couple examples. So with the 25 knot portion of this, which is real specialized, comes in when you're at this location report and you want to export the information to Excel. You notice there's an additional option here, Excel, export to Excel including 25 knot crosswind. It does that. And there's your Excel report. So it shows the onset of the date and time of 25 knot winds and the ending of 25 knot winds. Now sometimes that could start and stop, but it's going to pick the earliest start and the latest end. It also shows the other fields, latitude and longitude, 34 and 50 knot winds. So like I said, this is real specific to certain users' needs. So unless, and I know we have at least some folks that are interested in runways on the beta test group, that's how that works. And certainly if you have questions, let me know. Well, I promised this video would be shorter, but I'm not doing a real good job at that. We're up to 36 minutes, but we're almost done. So that's the crosswind. We talked usabilities, wind probabilities. You've seen these. The Excel export enhancements, other than the one we just talked about, now has forecast wind trend data and also has the new data fields from the observations that can all be exported via Excel. We won't go into a demonstration of that because as you do these functions, you should be able to create that. Risk impact reports, I think we've shown you already. That data shows up in those fields, the forecast wind trend data. I think that's all we need to say there. Narrative impact statement. Hopefully I'm not cutting this off at all. Has that information on the wind trend. And the storm surge improvements. Unfortunately, the beta test you get will not include any of the new slosh stuff. And also, by the way, the help text and documentation has not been updated. But anyhow, the storm surge stuff will be updated with some kind of patch. And enhanced network operations, you know, I don't expect you to even play with this unless you have a real interest in what I said earlier, which was that this is designed to have the server do all the work. Workstations do no updating. All they do is use the system. But you have to have a server version running 24/7. Then I won't go into any more details on how you do that, but I should show you the user option there. It probably will not be available to you in the beta, but I should at least show you where it is. So let me bring up the program, go into System Preferences, and it is under System Options. This field that's all grayed out here, Network Licenses Only. So the beta is not a network license. So basically it says, if you can read it, check this box if you only want the server to update databases and send out automatic emails and reports. See special instructions and documentation and helps, which isn't there now but will be. And finally, the system appearance, which we've already shown you. You've seen it before. You can pick different, let me bring that back down into the screen. You can pick different skins to come up with different looks that you like on your screen. I like kind of Vista Black. Isn't that bad? And then you pick Office Black. It's kind of a nice look to it. So I think that's mostly it. Obviously, when you do testing, test the old functions. And you're probably going to be doing that by selecting, doing things like opening a storm in case you haven't done this in a while. For example, Rita, and selecting a path along the storm and saying set post-storm analysis to this advisory. Some data might be missing, like the rainfall data, etc. But then what it'll do is use that map or that location to do the rest of your calculations. And unless you have storms you've set up as test storms, that's the easiest way to do it. Just use post-storm analysis. And all those functions should work the same as if that was the current position. And we'll probably have a dummy storm in late April, I think, that we can play with. So I think that's, like I said, that's it. Test all the functions, test the new functions if you can, and let me know of any problems you see. So as we have new things to say, I'll send out emails. I don't think there'll be another video unless there's something real detailed that we have to get into. And hopefully this has been of some help to you as you start doing some testing.